presenting on Healing the Returning Warrior, Keys to Understanding Unique Challenges and Strengths of American Indian and Alaska Native Veterans. And this is actually the fourth section in this series, which will be continuing over the next month. So all of our webinars are recorded. If you've ever missed a session, you can always go back and view it at a later date. Okay. The training series is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. We are part of the MHTTC network, which also includes 10 regional centers, a network coordinating office, and the National Hispanic and Latino MHTTC. This project is supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The content is developed by the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or American Indian and Alaska Native MHTTC. So in the next couple of days, we'll send out a follow-up email to everyone who attended, which includes a link to the recording, handouts of the slides, and a CEU request form. Our center is a NADAC certified educational provider, and we'd be happy to provide you with CEUs for a $15 fee. Immediately following today's webinar, you'll be redirected to our GIPRA evaluation. We really appreciate the time you take to fill out this survey. It just takes a couple of minutes, and it asks about your satisfaction with the event. Feedback is crucial to our work, and we value your opinion. So if you do have the time, we would love hearing your thoughts on that. You'll be muted for the duration of the webinar, so please use the chat pod to share your questions and comments, and we will address any questions at appropriate points during the presentation or at the end. So our first speaker today is Ray Daw. He's a member of our advisory council and one of our major consultants. Ray has been in the behavioral health field for about 35 years, working with the Navajo Nation, nonprofits, and most recently in Alaska. His work in behavioral health has been heavily geared towards Native trauma-appropriate approaches that are healing and effective in tribal behavioral health prevention, intervention, and treatment services. We also have Sean Bear, the co-director of our MHTTC. Mr. Bear has worked as an administrator and counselor in EAP, as a counselor in adolescent behavioral disorder program, substance abuse, and in-home family therapy. He has experience in building holistic Native American-based curriculum and implementing these curriculum and programs in substance abuse treatment and prevention. He is also an Army veteran of 9 years and was honorably discharged from the 82nd Airborne. So with that, I'd like to thank both of you, Sean and Ray, for your work on this project and for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today and over the past several months doing these webinars. So I'll leave it to you guys.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and start out and begin with the overview of the training. The the module that we're looking at today is the fifth in a series of 5 modules that have been designed for veterans, and you see the 5 topics that are available within this particular curriculum. And as you'll see, the 5th one down at the bottom, Healing the Healer, is the one that we're going to be reviewing today. The next webinar next month actually will be dealing with trauma, historical trauma, and PTSD. So that's our overview. We have 4 objectives in this module that we are going to work on covering, and the 4 objectives that you see. Number 1 is to discuss the challenges of working with veteran clients and patients. The second objective in this module is to develop understanding on how healing creates resilience. And the third objective is to describe compassion fatigue. That's a particularly important topic for those of us who spend time, or a good amount of time in our careers, working with traumatized populations, which certainly veterans qualify as. The fourth objective is to describe the value of managing stress. We encounter stress in our work, and we oftentimes move away from how we manage stress. So it's good to have these reminders sometimes. It's okay. And the first objective, where we're going to discuss the challenges of working with clients and patients. Our purpose for this objective in particular is that this training will provide a promising means of providing culturally competent training for American Indian and Alaska Native treatment providers using Native American beliefs and practices. So we have our objective there and the purpose for this particular objective, the ways it's developed. Well, while working with clientele, veterans in particular, um, you know, veterans have um, um, concerns around death because there's particularly combat veterans, client safety and ongoing issues in life are that often sometimes recur, uh, and those are things to keep in mind. There are things that bother us. Uh, all if things are bothering us all weekend and affecting uh, my personal life and family, then working might be contributing to that, and that's when it becomes time to needing to rest. Um, and one of the things I remember learning of this in school, particularly in my master's program, was remembering balancing one's life and work, and learning ways to do that well, uh, learning to balance personal life and work in a way that um, uh, helps us manage that stress and helps us move that way. So let's see here. And it's important in terms of managing our personal work and life to remember that we cannot make our clients' issues ours. It's a really important thing to distinguish. It's a very common thing for folks to kind of get enmeshed in the concerns and solutions that our clients have or are working on, and that's always something to be aware of, is to avoid not doing that. Then there are areas of information that we want to tend to keep in mind or to remember, the positive things and negative things, and then when we think about the positive and negatives of client information, and then being cognizant of which ones we do tend to take home with us, and it's not a matter really of not doing it, but not taking client positives and negatives home with us, but it's a matter of recognizing when do we do that, because I think it's inevitable, particularly if we have strong passion or compassion about our work and people we work with, that we will invariably end up taking some things home with us. And those are ideas that are important to remember. And there are things that clients bring to us, or patients bring to us, or families bring to us that can sometimes affect our lives at home and affect our personal life with our families and our friends and our relatives, and including our work. So these are some reasons why it's important to uh, stay in touch with what happens with us when we're working with clients or patients. Sean, do you have anything to bring up? So one of the things that Sean describes doing on this slide is that he each day beginning to take the last 15, 20 minutes of work to decompress or work to let things go from whatever happened during the daytime, and to meditate on letting go of client-patient um, uh, interactions that we encounter. And I think that those are very valuable things to do. It's certainly a practice that a good number of us do when we work in office settings or treatment settings or community settings where you end up having to. I end up having to do that also. Take time out at the end to just kind of take deep breaths and process what happened and how not to let the events of the day stay with me when I make it home. And as it's mentioned here, it's a difficult thing to get used to doing, to make it a regular practice. Uh, but then what I've learned is that over time it is a lot less difficult to process at the end of the day and go home with a clarity in my mind and clarity in my feelings and clarity in my thoughts and 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 get home better grounded. It does get easier, and you got to make sure that uh, the things that the clients bring to you are addressed to the best of your ability. That you do everything you can, and learn not to make their issues yours or mine. Uh, it's a process of practice and practice and practice and learning as you go. And the clients have choices too, and that we as helpers, counselors, therapists, facilitators, that we do have a part, but we can only do what we can with the time and energy and space that is made available to us by clients, in particular veterans that come to see us. And there are times when it is important to recognize when we need more time to meditate and take a little bit longer than the 15 or 30 minutes. Uh, One of the things that I would do is if I feel I need more time to process and get myself grounded, I'll take a little walk or kind of meander, let's say, to where I need to go. Take my time to the car, or take my time walking to another appointment or something like that. So you take longer breaks, basically what that means. And then that's valuable because when you do get home, and when you get to that door of your home, and once you pass the threshold of the door, then that's your personal time. That's your space, not the space of people that we work with. Uh, and that ends up a good way to consider how we uh, uh, interact with places we live in. Desiree Andon has a really good comment where she talks about disconnecting energy from a previous and toxic client. That's very good comments, Desiree. Thank you very much. Like washing your hands in cold water up past your elbows, and that's a practice that I guess she's adopted or is describing that helps build some of that disconnect. Like washing your hands off. And that really resonates to some practices that we have, like smudging or wiping away tears and things to begin to move away from highly emotional times and incidences. So I appreciate the comments that Desiree is bringing up to us. Thank you. So in the process of learning to be providers who are well and healthier, it is good to take the wisdom of our ancestors and the teachings of our ancestors and look at them. Because the teachings of our ancestors is about um, harmony, and that it's key to live in harmony with ourselves, and that we're not separate from other people. We're connected to others, but also and that we're connected by spirit is what this section is about, and and that we learn to heal and take care of ourselves as a whole person, not just our emotions, or not just our behaviors, or not just our thoughts, or not just our physical being, but our whole body, our body, mind, and spirit. And emotions are who make us up as a whole, and the teachings from our ancestors that we take care of all four aspects of ourselves. If we do that effectively and are able to sustain that effectively, then we're better able to help and assist others in their journey of letting go of whatever might be troubling them or whatever might be impeding their life, and working with our veteran patients especially, and honoring them as a whole person. Uh, and that's some of the teachings that we bring from our ancestors that's valuable to keep in mind. Sean can take over the second objective and go through this.
Okay, so objective 2, understand how healing creates resilience. The purpose is to discuss how in Native cultures resilience is taught. Okay, so when we look at, in a sense, the medicine wheel, we normally have, in a sense, 4 parts, but yet, even though the medicine wheel there is broken into 4, we also have one above, one below, which is with the earth, and wherever we are. So the difference of that, in a sense, is where we are. There are many different beliefs about that, and some will say that it's wherever we stand or wherever our heart is. So looking at the physical, we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves physically. Getting exercise, eating healthy, might be saying positive things to yourself, and making sure you get the sleep you need. Looking at emotions, it can be flexible, but we need to be able to have a positive outlook, and we need to self-regulate ourselves. And this part here is actually a part in which youth have difficulty in mastering at this age. So if we look at the physical, we look at a youth born, and at first they grow really fast. Everything is going really fast for them. We get to the emotional part within teenage years and such, more into early 20s. They're still learning to master their emotions in order to control them. Because at the time, when their brain and everything is growing, maturing, some of these different parts of the brain are not totally mature, so they cannot always control those. So they might be attention seeking, really going by what they receive from around them to rewards. The spiritual, of course, mental, of course, is it's where the next part of you get into being an adult, and at that time is when you begin to master your mental self, and it overcomes the emotions so that you're able to kind of control them and do things with them that it's helpful for you, and how you think about things. So we also need to remember that when we are working with people, we actually have to kind of like mentally look at that and saying, well, I know that I'm here to listen. I know that I cannot take this information that's going on personally. You need to be able to step back a little bit and look at that from all different angles. So a lot of times it's like they always have, like in motivational interviewing, um, this emotional aspect part of it in trying to regulate, kind of like emotional intelligence and how people might feel with one another. So as a client is telling you their story, maybe some counselors will just listen to it and said, okay, that's very interesting. Or, tell me more about that. But if you look at other ways of doing it, in such ways as putting yourself in their shoes, in a sense, when they tell you the story, you can also kind of pretend that you are the one that's going through it. So maybe if they tell you these kids are picking on them or different things going on in the hallways or whatever it might be, you can kind of imagine that and think about, how would I feel? How would I feel if people were treating me that way? And you can look at it. But there's also other points, is like, let's say somebody does something and we overreact. Maybe we get angry. Maybe we kind of lash out, hit somebody or fight or something like that. Well, we usually kind of see things a lot better after things have happened to be able to think about it. But also, this is also a point where when this person is going through it, you can also learn to step back and see what's going on, almost like a movie, and imagine what's going on all around. Think how people think about it. Maybe one person was he was teased before. Maybe he's having problems at home. Maybe there's things going on with his father or mother. Maybe he comes from an abusive family, so that is the reason he's acting out and teasing another child. But then this child here, and then is kind of pushing back because it's kind of butting heads. But we get more into the spiritual things. Is we need to be able to stay spiritually healthy. We need to have a tolerance of others, with their belief systems, with our belief systems, with all that is going on around, and be able to look at all these different values that people might have in order to kind of find a medium area in how to help someone and ourselves. So then it goes back to healing work. Okay, so we know that within healing, they have medicine people and things like that. You go to a healer, maybe they're removing things from people, maybe they're removing sickness. Sometimes they're just kind of dusting things off. Maybe they're using objects such as stones or feathers, or having herbal teas, or maybe they're using a sweat lodge or something like that, and they're able to draw that out to be able to heal that person. Some may require fasting. We always have to remember that even though there are healers, there are medicine peoples and these things that can do like that, sometimes the only thing that can help is fasting. This is, such as staying away from something. Normally within like different native cultures, you might fast for 4 days, no food or water. I know that some people might, different systems have maybe just liquids and stuff, but normally you go totally without. And some tribes don't have fasting either, so that's something you to kind of consider. But sometimes we might drink a tea, maybe something to pray for, maybe such as even when you're taking a shower, imagine, washing these off, or maybe you can use a medicine that you pour on yourself that you can wash that off. Some require specific ceremonies. There are many different ceremonies around, all of the United States and Canada. There are different tribes that are connected to each other, do many different ceremonies and such. Some things cannot be removed unless the person lets go of that. That's something that needs to be taken into consideration as well, because even sometimes, like in different ceremonies, the healer may be used in order to pass a sickness or something through. So then, in a sense, it travels through the medicine person and then removed by their spirits. But that's something, it can be a little dangerous. But we also need to take into account our counseling fee, because in that moment we are doing these things, it becomes, in a sense, energetically the same kind of process. Okay, so remember, healing has to be a mutual thing. Although both have to have faith, and one person is his work, but the other one, they say they have to believe in that. They have to believe in those ways for it to work. There's also different teachings of different directions and such. So sage, cedar, sweetgrass, maybe even tobacco. So then sometimes what happens is, but depending on where you are, these belief systems can be very different. So like the way I was taught is tobacco's in the West, because that is the direction in which we go home and we come from. So cedar's in the North, because normally that's where a lot of stuff go. Plus it's where there's a lot of knowledge is in the North, where it's buried underneath the ice and snow for thousands of years. Sage is in the East. That's where the healing comes from. It's also where the sun comes up. But also there's sweetgrass in the South. There's a lot of different areas, such as power comes from that area. So remember to look at many different belief systems, because they're all important, and you have to be able to combine them all to be able to fully understand these things. So remember, in a sense, we all have gifts. Some might have gifts more than others at this point, but they say one day it's like everybody will be the same. But also we need to remember that even though people go to others for healing, it is possible to help heal yourself. And these are some of the things we'll be talking about for counselors, for therapists, and in a sense being able to assist people so that they don't end up with secondary trauma. Okay, so first of all, we need to be able to take a time out. Sometimes when we're in the healing or we're in a counseling kind of area, we need to be able to take time out. Even medicine men, they do a lot of healers, especially a lot of healings, especially like when they're dealing with cancers, different kind of diseases and things, and removing them and such, and working with these people to get rid of that. They can be in danger. They have to be able to take time out once in a while. If they keep going on over and over and over and over again, they too might get sick. Because remember, like we said before, some might have to pass through the person in order for some to be healed. So they are taught that they must take that time out for healings, or they might become sick. Remember that also sometimes, when there are different kind of healings, some are group healings. A lot of different tribes do these group healings, such as a big ceremony that everybody gets assistance in this help. I do know, like in the woodland tribes, they also have group healings. They also have many of these individual healings. So people might wind up outside of somebody's house, and they keep going in and out, and they're getting their individual kind of healings and answers and guidance that way. But with that, it's how can we put this? Okay, but over time, it can take a toll on people. Certain healings in a sense, or it can be a little more dangerous than others. But just as a counselor is working with a client or patient, it's very similar to how a healer works with their patient. Because we need to remember that we all have our own kind of energy bubbles, in a sense, our own energy fields. And that is one of the very first teachings that I was taught, is that we have our own energy around us. Everything around us and all the world, in a sense, is made of energy. So when we're walking around, we're all in our same kind of bubble. But over time, what happens is when healing comes together and these two people are working together, those two persons' energy connect and they're in one bubble. Yeah, I'm not sure where that background is coming from. It's somewhere else.
Ray, do you have things on mute?
We're going now.
We can hear someone else.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ray. Or go ahead, Sean.
Okay, so there are times in a sense we have to take that time out. If they do not, then they're more likely to get sick. It's there's a higher chance that somebody might become have a secondary trauma, and they're carrying that around. Because remember, there's energies. Everything has energies: thoughts, feelings, emotions, behaviors, everything around us. So if you think badly about somebody, you're sending that energy. When you're telling people a story, there's an energy to it. It's like, that's why there's certain names, like Indian names and things like that, have a power, a gift to it. Just as our old stories have a power to it that can help others. So that's something to be able to kind of take into an account when you're doing these things. But there are things you can do to help yourself. Make sure you pray, rest, eat right, exercise, meditate, and if you have to, fast or get some help from somebody else. So with secondary trauma, in a sense, you need to be able to kind of balance out your counselors, balance out those different people, so that they're all getting about the same amount. Because if one person is piled up with all these difficult people, they're more likely to burn out. And if this happens, then they're either going to have to take a break, or they're going to have to seek counseling themselves. And sometimes they might need to be able to be counseled once in a while anyway. It's good to be able to have their staff meetings and to be able to help each other during that time. Ray, would you like to go, or would you like me to continue?
No, go ahead and keep going, Sean. You're doing good.
Okay, so acknowledging the old, in a sense. It's like the old ways, the old knowledge. We must remember that long ago, people were taught not to do things that would harm others. So this might be through words, thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions. All things have a spirit, such as a tree, stone, animals, birds, water, fire, people. But even so, there is also energy, which is comprised in all things, even the words we were talking about before. These could be positive or negative. So these too can affect people, or groups, or communities. It's just like when they say one bad apple ruins a whole bunch. You might have a child come into a room very angry. They might not be doing much, but it spreads throughout the children. It's because that energy is affecting more and more people and going on. And if you're around certain kind of things going on within your workplace, it can affect us. And we need to be able to take those into account and take care of ourselves. And if we're smudging, maybe we need to get out. Maybe you need to get some air going through that building to clear out that energy. Maybe things need to be able to wash down or something. Also, when you get home, maybe washing yourself off. There are different medicines you can use, the different teas, in a sense, to wash yourself off of. There are other ways you can do that as well. I won't talk about that all here. Okay, so relating to the world around us. As we know in all of creation, it all has energy. We realize that every part of how we think, feel, believe, speak, and act affects others around us. We realize now that we can each walk around in our own bubbles of energies. Those energy for ours and others bump into one another, which also carries the core energies of our internal beliefs, thoughts, and beings. When I say core, that is, in a sense, reflective of how you are most of the time. Yes, people's energies might be a little bit different in different areas because maybe that's how they're thinking at the time, maybe that's how they're feeling, maybe what's going on, maybe because of sickness or disease or anything like this. But the core, in a sense, is how that person is all of the time. The more positive this person is, more likely that core is going to be positive, and more likely that this core is going to have a higher amount of energy. You know, people might call it vibration or whatever, but whatever it is, like stronger there. It's something you can't really hide in a sense because that is the core of yourself. So, and this energy, in a sense, is reflective of that. So, no matter what it is, we have peoples who, maybe they pretend they're good, but this core you can definitely tell is not quite the same. So, but as energies affect one another, so too does the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of people affect each other. So families, neighbors, cities, states, continents, worlds, solar systems, and so forth. That's part of those teachings. We need to be able to treat those around us good. You know, our family is going to affect one another. Our neighborhoods are going to affect one another. The cities and the states, the continents, the world, solar system, everything. So it grows more and more as it goes out. And the more things that are positive, the more positivity we see around us. Okay, so we need to remember that sometimes our mind is a lot stronger than we think. Just like with anxiety or something, we begin to fear or worry, and this kind of builds up over time. There are different things going on, like certain energy points within our body that sickness tends to develop. And that's because of how we as people store our hurts, store certain emotions and thoughts and feelings. So this is what a medicine man said. If a person cannot get in control of their thoughts of fear, the thoughts will overwhelm the person, making them seem crazy. What he was saying is like some people can get sick because of all this fear. Maybe it becomes into more of a trauma or phobias, something like that. Your thoughts can guide the spirit into the future or the past. So the more we worry about the past, the more likely our spirit is to travel there. The more we are worried about the future, the more likely our spirit will travel there. So in a sense, that's why it's so important for us to be able to be kind of thinking about what we're doing at the time, at this moment. How are we doing? Because we can't do anything about the past. We can't do much about the future except for plan ahead. But we need to be able to think about all this at once. Some people with diagnoses such as schizophrenia have actually wandered too far into the spirit world without knowing or without proper instruction. That's part of some of those kind of teachings that they talk about, is that when one develops, in a sense, this either sight or hearing, in a sense, and fear is part of it, well, what happens is, out of fear, we tend, in a sense, to be worried about things, especially if we're worried about getting harmed, like in trauma or like with veterans or something like that. We're going to be worried about that. We're always at attention there. We're always worrying about what's going on and looking for every little thing that might happen, but so is our senses. They're reaching out But if some of these people, gifted ones, are having the same kind of difficulty, then it gets a little bit difficult because, in a sense, their gifts are going to turn on too because they're worried. Their gifts open up. They're hearing further away. They're sensing further away and might be picking up on things that really don't have to affect them at all. So that can be a danger with it. Even some medicine people have difficulty in maintaining a balance between the physical and the spiritual. Either people become too physical or too spiritual. In a sense, there's a danger of both. With these, they need to be able to learn how to control this, focusing on the other until they learn to turn it on and off at will. And that's part of those ones who learn these gifts. It's you have to be able to turn it off, because if you can't do this at will, in a sense, that it's going to come up and bite you later on. Okay, so the Maharishi Effect. So this was a study that was done back in, the 1980s. Anyway, they had these, they got together these clergymen and people like that, and they began to show, it was in 1972, they showed some things, but they went to cities. They had all these clergymen talking and praying all together within a city to lower the crime, if the crime was getting high. And during that time, the crime actually went down in all these different cities. So they'd stop for a little bit and then kind of rise back up. Again, they would do this again, the crime would go down. When this whole study kind of came about, what it said was that for every 100 people, or 100 people for every 10,000 people, 100 must be praying for everyone in order to affect 10,000 people. So they began to get other people, and this became kind of a practice within their communities and towns in order to help to stop crime, stop these kind of things that are going on. But I do know, I've heard from different healers, different people, is that some people's prayers are stronger than others. They do say women's prayers for their children are one of the most powerful prayers there is. So it's probably possible that even if somebody has very strong prayers, they might be able to affect even more people. Ray, would you like to, or?
I think you're almost done with this section. Go ahead and continue.
Okay. Okay. So therapists are continually helping people, much like a filter, like a medicine person would, or healer. We must also remember to rid ourselves of these as well. Take care of yourself, or you won't be able to take care of others. Now, that's one of the teachings is with people first become healers and spiritual people. They must learn to heal themselves or to help themselves before they can help or heal others. Many times a therapist may hold on to their clients or clientele's issues, worrying about what may or may not happen, which brings more stress upon the therapist, such as maybe you're hearing all these things, and at the end of the week, you're thinking, oh man, it's like, I hope these guys are going to be okay this week. And I know I've had some clients that have had some really difficulty this time, and I'm really trying to prepare, giving them phone numbers and giving them these things in case something happens. I've been trying to teach them these crisis management skills or whatever it might be. We must stay healthy in mind, body, spirit, emotions if we are to continue helping clientele. By honoring the whole person, us, and learning to let go, will allow us to focus our efforts in harmony so that as not to be inhibited by our own issues. So in a sense, we need to be able to trust in how we work with our clients, how we work with these people. If if we're giving them those skills that they need, we need to be able to try to trust in those as well. And that's kind of what I began to do. Give them all the things I possibly can. That's as much as I could do. I had to learn to trust that. But eventually, it's like as time went on, I didn't have to focus as much anymore at the end of the day. It became a habit. So as soon as I hit that door, open the door, close the door, it was all gone. I was on my own time. So, okay, so to help heal the therapist, if we are to continue helping clientele through our own self-healing in relationship to North American teachings, wisdom, and the medicine wheel, if we don't keep ourselves healthy and in balance, we won't be as successful in promoting the healing and wellness of others. We need to be able to take care of ourselves, take care of others. Okay. Right.
Good. All righty, we're on to objective 3. We're going to spend some time describing compassion fatigue, and our purpose for this section is to work on describing how healers experience compassion fatigue. It's kind of related to some of the parts in objective 1, but here we're going to go into this. Let's see here. Okay. All right. What is compassion fatigue? Well, it can be looked at as pretty much the same way as healers, as knowledge of pain, sorrow, the hurt that oftentimes is a reflection of the one being healed. When we really begin to feel the pain of a patient or a client, and it really does have an effect on us. When we feel like it's our own pain, and can be interpreted as they are, and energetically, we may share energies within that bubble of hurt and sorrow, and especially when our patients or our clients are not aware of how to protect themselves, or that they have control or the capacity to feel their own energies. And then there's some consideration that having bouts with compassion fatigue is like an illness, and it's important to work on breaking that up. There's a nice little graphic on what compassion fatigue brings to us and how it can impact us, with stress and tiredness and an overwhelming sense of compassion to the pains of the person that we're working with. Mind over matter. Well, depression is when we have thoughts and feelings about the past, and when with veterans in particular, because many of our veterans end up in combat situations or situations of a lot of violence and anger and death and injuries and one of the major aspects of being a veteran is survivor guilt, and survivor guilt can and does bring on depression, because survivor guilt is having thoughts and feelings about the past. Then we have anxiety. Anxiety is when we have thoughts and feelings about the future, things that we tend to think that this will happen, when reality is that they probably won't, can't, or not a reasonable thoughts and feelings about things that may happen in the future. When we get bundled up in that, then it ends up expressing itself as anxiety. For example, when I'm living sometimes we young people or even adults will say, when I grow up or later on in the future, I want to be this. Then you get tied up uh, in the thoughts and feelings associated with what you want to be or what you want to do, and then it ends up being a worry and expressing itself as anxiety. Uh, and kind of related to that is when we have thoughts about how life should be. Life is about this, and if we've had encounters or experiences that have not been good for us or traumatic for us, then we'll end up wishing that those things didn't happen or hoping that they didn't happen, and then we end up uh, getting bundled up in fatigue because of that. And this is where the mind over matter thinking comes out. Our own thoughts, well, one good exercise to do is this exercise here, where you close your eyes and you literally work at not thinking, not speaking, and making your body relax, and having no internal dialogue. I've learned when I practice this, and as I practice this, I become, like Sean mentioned earlier, we become a little more able to do this kind of exercise and be able to, not be so overwhelmed with our thoughts about the past or thoughts about the future. Uh, and this is a good exercise to sometimes practice with patients. Have them close their eyes and have them work at not thinking about whatever might be running in their mind or what they might be thinking about, and ask them not to speak and to relax their body. Then afterwards, bring them back out of that and ask them about their experiences, and then have a discussion around what peace means to you. So we thought we'd include this as an example exercise that we can engage in with ourselves as we work on understanding our compassion fatigue, but also exercises we can work on with veterans, especially because survivor guilt is about having strong compassion about the experiences that you had with your brothers and your sisters in the military, and not quite being able to come to resolution to that. Peacefulness. Well, what does peacefulness mean to me? It can be a quiet mind. Um, it can be that I begin to fully believe that to find peace within the chaos of life can be a great achievement, and it becomes one of my life goals is really to have some peace amidst all the chaos that's going on in my immediate world and the world outside of my immediate world. This is a process that I think many of us work on a lot, is attaining peace. And Navajo and many of our traditional ways is about attaining and sustaining peace. So this is what we're talking about in this part. Then we go from that to teachings about fear and anger, shame, guilt, jealousy, greed, envy, and so on, and how they're meant to be fought and meant to be overcome. All different kinds of ways, whether you're native or not. You come across teachings we come across teachings in our life about how to deal with envy, how to deal with jealousy, and it's not uncommon for anybody to move away from those kinds of teachings and end up not fully appreciating those teachings or not remembering those teachings. And so teachings are important to have talk about. How were you taught about this? Might be a good question to ask. And we often worry about things that really don't even really matter. Uh, when you get to the kernel of the truth, that is some perspective that is okay to have, and that's sometimes okay to express. Not everything is going to bring the world on us, bring the world down on us. And within this concept of compassion fatigue, one of the major ways of turning that around, when we're feeling that kind of fatigue and stress related to that, is coming to a way of letting go. Much like that 15 to 20-minute timeout process that we have. And think about what things scare us. There are many people who aren't afraid of mice or snakes or worms, for example, and that's a way to conceptualize that. Because we don't want to be carrying the pain and negative emotions and thoughts of folks we encounter in our work and having that impact us. And for some people who don't have fear, something that
Would you like me to
gives you the release.
Or wait for questions?
Okay. So, yeah.
Did it lose you?
Hmm. We have a lot of items in this section, and so we're kind of taking our time at it. And I see we are coming to the end of our allotted time. So letting go, you got to let go of things in order to be able to move ahead. Spiritual lives, how we learn them and how we live them are important considerations. In Objective 4, we talk about understanding the value of managing stress and the purpose and understanding of how stress can be identified and resolved.
Okay. Thanks, Ray, Sean.
Okay.
Does anybody have any particular questions we can answer at this time? We'll look for them in the chat here. While we're waiting for the questions, first of all, I want to thank both of you again. We'll do our last webinar series coming up here in April. And that one will focus a lot on PTSD. Also, I just want to let you guys know we are still planning to host a project implementation learning community in San Diego in April, the 14th and 15th. It's a free training. All you have to do is get there, and we provide the hotel and meals. But what it consists of is it identifies effective practices aligned with the needs of your tribal population of focus, and we try and strengthen the workforce and organizational capacity during this. We talk about documenting evaluation outcomes, how to sustain a program, program development, and essentially how to just identify the needs. So if any of you are interested, we have extended the deadline to participate in this. I know a lot of people are on travel restrictions, and that's been a problem for many of us in the country. So if you're interested, please do know that we have available space left, and as far as I know, we're still planning for this. If changes should come, you will be the first to know. And I guess that's all I have. I don't see any questions. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. And if you do get the GIPRA form to fill out, we would appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Thanks, guys.